It's so exciting to know so many folks that are here and to see you all in one place and to have this celebration. Great.
Not yet.
Did we get an official wave in?
He was going to intro us.
Good. Okay.
There we go.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. Thank you all for being here. My name is Quentin Ring. I am Beyond Baroque's executive director. It's really wonderful to have everyone gathered. It's been a very difficult start to the year between the fires and everything going on politically. And so we're here at Beyond Baroque. We're always very, just feel really gratified to have a community gathering around poetry and art and just having an opportunity to be together. Today is actually a very special event because we're here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Gunpowder Press. I think it's actually the 11th, is that right?
Going towards 11.
Yeah, going towards 11. So,
we've successfully completed our 10th.
that year, yeah. We had hoped to schedule this at the end of last year, and the scheduling didn't work out. But we'll say it's the 10th still, and go with that. So before we get started, I want to say a few words about Beyond Baroque, and very much I wanted to start by acknowledging our presence here on Tongva land. We, as an arts organization, acknowledge the wrong done to indigenous peoples through settler colonialism and the violent dispossession of their lands. And Beyond Baroque is very much committed to uplifting indigenous communities, their narratives, and their art. As an arts organization, we exist principally to support writers and especially poets. We do that in a variety of ways. We have a workshops program, including our free Wednesday night poetry workshop, which has been running continuously since 1969. Many poets have gone through that and really helped shape the poetry culture of Los Angeles. We also have individual intensive classes. Those happen about once a month. We have multi-week classes. We had a manuscript lab that is being run by Sarah Ellen Fowler that just got out, who's here, I think, somewhere maybe. And so just stay tuned for those kind of opportunities as they pop up. We don't have anything planned in the next couple of weeks, but as we get into March, we'll have plenty more workshops. We also have a reading and performance series right here in this theater. We have about 100 events a year, so there's sort of 2 or 3 events every weekend here. If you stick around today, we have a kind of double header right after this, partially due to some rescheduling from the wildfires. We have an art opening actually for the artist Ansel Krut. You can see his work on the walls. It just got installed yesterday. The official opening will be right after this program at 4, so you can stick around for that. And then we also have a program on transborder video arts featuring Mexican and Chicanx video artists that will be here in this theater at 7. Later, looking into next week, on Thursday, we have Corinne Topal and Jan Wesley, 2 really wonderful poets. And just a variety of programs sort of going on through the rest of the month. So you can check all that out at beyondbaroque.org. Check our social media. We have stuff going on all the time. I really hope to see all of you back, even those of you who are down here from Santa Barbara or Ventura or wherever. We can't really do what we do without the support of our members. We are charging for events, right? For most of our events right now. There are sort of some pretty severe cutbacks going in the arts ecosystem, and so we're supported in part by ticket sales, but also by our members. So if you become a member, it costs as little as $60 for a student or senior, $75 for a regular membership, $100 is a dual membership. We have levels above that. If you become a member, you get into our events for free. You get a discount on our bookstore. You get a discount on our paid workshops. So you get a lot in return, but you also very much help support the space, help us pay poets, help us really build a community around poetry. And so those of you who are members, we really appreciate it. And if you're not and you consider becoming one, we'd be very grateful. We can offer a couple premiums today as part of, if you do become a member. We have The Writing Life, which is a collection of memories and anecdotes and tips for how to become a writer from Beyond Baroque's community over the past 55 years. And we also have this is the 10th anniversary of our own anthology, Wide Awake, Poets of Los Angeles and Beyond, which is a really great anthology, really wonderful poets in it. So if you become a member at the individual level, you can get one of these. If you come at the dual level, you get both of these. So you can see Genesis in the bookstore about that. I apologize for the long spiel about membership, but we got to do what we got to do to keep the space open. So beyond that, I don't want to say too much more other than to thank our staff for putting this together. Yvonne Salinas, our programs manager, Jimmy Vega, our associate director, Genesis Perez in the bookstore, Eric Alberg, who's running things in the booth. They keep the place running. And I just also really want to thank Gunpowder Press for all the work they've done for the literary community. It's a real labor of love to run a small press, and it just does a wonderful thing for the writers in Southern California. And so we are going to start the program with a little bit of a conversation. We have the co-editors of Gunpowder Press, David Starkey and Chryss Yost, and they're going to do a little talk, and then we'll have some readings. All the poets, writers, wonderful. So thank you all so much for being here. And the only other thing I say is buy the writers' books, buy Gunpowder Press's books, which are in the bookstore. They're for sale after the reading. I'm sure you can get them signed. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm just gonna sit down because I do have a few things to read, and I'm thinking if I stand up and go like this, it's gonna be really awkward. So I am David Starkey, the publisher and co-editor with Chryss Yost of Gunpowder Press. I want to thank Quentin and Yvonne, especially for helping us set this afternoon up. And I did want to start off with a moment of silence for all our friends and family and fellow Californians who have been affected by the fires. Just a moment. So we'll dedicate today's program to everyone who has been affected by this trauma. The program is basically three parts. The end will be a reception and a book signing. But first, we'll have this short interview. The main part of our program today is going to be readings, and so I wanted to introduce the poets first, so we don't have to do that each time somebody comes up. And then poets, I'll ask you all to hold it to 10 minutes a piece, so you don't eat up someone else's time. And I was going to say I could, wave my hands, but we can't see anything up here, so that probably wouldn't do much good. So our first reader, after we finish our interview, will be Nan Cohen. Her awards for poetry include a Wallace Stegner Fellowship, a Rona Jaffe Writers Award, and a Literature Fellowship in Poetry from the National Endowment for the Arts. Nan is also the longtime co-director of poetry programs for the Napa Valley Writers Conference. She is the author of a chapbook, 1,000-Year-Old Words, the full-length collection, Rope Bridge, and then for us, Unfinished City, which was the winner of the Dryden Vreeland Award in 2017. The book was also a finalist for the Koret Award for an emerging writer on Jewish themes. After Nan, we'll hear from Susan Kelly-DeWitt, who's flown down from Sacramento with her husband. Susan is yes, go Sacramento, my hometown. A former Wallace Stegner Fellow also, past program director of the Sacramento Poetry Center and the Women's Wisdom Arts Program, and a former poet in the schools and poet in the prisons. She has a long biography, but with us, she published Gatherer's Alphabet in 2022, and that was the first volume in the California Poets series. We were also pleased to publish Susan's follow-up collection last year, Frangible Operas. Our third reader is Catherine Hodges. She has published poems in a number of venues. She's an English professor emeritus at Porterville College. She writes, edits, teaches privately, and collaborates with musician Rob Hodges on Ancestral, Yokutslan. Catherine is the winner of the very first Barry Spax Poetry Prize. That was way back in 2015, hard to believe. And Gunpowder has published two of her three subsequent collections, Raft of Days in 2017 and Empty Me Full last year. Our next reader is Amelia Rodriguez, a journalist and a poet from the Coachella Valley. She's the recipient of the San Diego Press Club's 2023 Rising Star Award and a 2024 Best of Show Award. She is currently the associate editor at San Diego Magazine, where she covers, quote, art, culture, and obscure women's sports. Her articles and poetry have been published in a number of magazines. And her chapbook, The First Amelia, was co-winner of our 2023 Alta California Chapbook Contest. Next will be Nicholas Tino Reiner. His poems have appeared, yes, in Spillway, Aquifer, Western Humanities Review, and others. Nick is a senior press strategist at the ACLU of Southern California, where he works to protect the liberty of all people. Good works. He holds degrees in English from Stanford and the University of California, Irvine, where he completed his MFA. His debut poetry chapbook with us, Levitations, was co-winner of the first Alta California Chapbook Contest in 2022. Yes. And our sixth reader, Crystal AC Salas, has worked in a number of journals. She's a founding member of the Break Bread Literacy Project, which elevates the voices of young creatives under 25. Crystal serves as poetry editor for Break Bread magazine. She holds an MFA from the University of California, Riverside, and is the recipient of a 2021-2022 California Arts Council established individual artist fellowship. Crystal's Grief Logic was co-winner with Nick of the first Alta California Chapbook Prize. And finally, she didn't really want to do this, but I talked her into it. You'll be hearing from my co-editor at Gunpowder Press, Chryss Yost. Yay. Chryss is a Santa Barbara Poet Laureate who served from 2013 to 2015. She was awarded the 2013 Patricia Dobler Poetry Prize from Carlow University and has multiple Pushcart Prize nominations. Her poems are widely published and anthologized. And her first collection, Mouth and Fruit, was one of the two titles that launched Gunpowder Press in 2014. And last but not least, before I hand the mic over to George, a few words about George Yatchisin. He is the author of Feast Days, published by Flutter Press in 2016, and The First Night We Thought the World Would End, kind of a published by Brandenburg Press in 2019. He is co-editor of the Gunpowder anthology Rare Feathers and also Big Enough for Words. His poetry appears in numerous anthologies, including real verse poems about the movies. So George, I'm going to pass over to you.
Well, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Let's start at the beginning. We're going to talk about how Gunpowder got founded, but I think before that, we need to bring up something well before the past 10 years, the 3rd century. Barbara of Nicomedia, why is she important to you guys?
Okay. So Barbara of Nicomedia is Saint Barbara, and she is the founding saint for Santa Barbara, the city where we live. And she is the patron saint of gunpowder because when she was about to be martyred, her father, who had turned her in like a big jerk, got struck by lightning. And so she's always connected with explosions, fires, and gunpowder. So we are honoring our city in this weird, violent way by bringing together gunpowder and poetry.
And I had just returned with my wife from a while in Rome. I wanted to call the press Dopodomani Press, which means day after tomorrow press. I thought that was a really cool name, but Chryss said gunpowder's better, yeah.
I can spell that.
Yeah. So what brought you to make Gunpowder then, 10, 12 years ago?
So a friend, Nan Cohen, was just mentioning our mutual friend, David Case, who passed away in 2011 in February. Was a great friend of mine when we were students together at UCLA. And he left behind a collection of what I thought were really fantastic poems. I put them together in a book because he named me as his literary executor. And I couldn't find anyone to publish them because David was no longer alive to go promote the book. Meantime, Chryss had a collection of poems which I had also read that was looking for a home that I thought was superb. And so we started talking, and I said, I'm thinking about starting up this press. Would you be interested in having your book published? And she said, yes, by the way, I also have some skills that I might be able to bring to the press. I was like, oh, well, that sounds pretty good. So not knowing what these skills were, I said, sure. And all of you who have published a book with Gunpowder Press or seen our books know that Chryss is one of the best book designers in the country. We didn't know that at the time, but that turned out to be a great boon for us. And that's essentially how the press started.
No comment, Chryss.
No, I am a sucker for flattery, so apparently
We'll just leave it there then, okay.
far too generous.
So now that you're 10 years in, do you feel like there's a Gunpowder feel? Like this is the kind of book we're looking for, the kind of poems we're looking for, since you're now also publishing Anacapa Review, so you're doing a journal, online journal too. What is it that draws you guys to the poems that you choose to publish?
I think I started out as kind of more of a formal poet, so I really love sound. I love the hint of form. They don't have to be strictly formal, but I love the craft of poetry. So not only the emotion that informs it, but like actually seeing the craft of the poets. I just find that exciting, and the craftsmanship of it.
And I think I would agree with that. I think for us, while the story behind a poem, the story that's presented in a poem is important, we're just looking for something that gives us that little chill that tells us it's a poem, whether it's a complete book or a poem in Anacapa Review or a chapbook. But, I think we're always kind of trying to push back against what we already like. And so that's part of it is we have our ingrained tastes, but how can we kind of stretch them a little bit?
And powerful images that stick with you. I mean, a lot of times when we're reading through, because we read through all the manuscripts, anybody that sends us something on Submittable, we are the ones reading through them. And a lot of times you'll find, weeks later, an image is sticking with you. And you're like, okay, that's saying something, and then there's other books where you kind of go back and you look at it for a second time and you're like, okay, well, not quite ready. But the other ones, it's just, they sing, it's amazing. A lot of people that you hear today are those people whose poems just sing.
And obviously your first prize was the Barry Spax Prize, named after Santa Barbara's first poet laureate and great mentor to many and wonderful poet that we all miss a lot. But then you've kept adding different prizes and things. How does that process go along, and how do you decide this is the kind of work we want to be building a prize around?
Well, our next prize was the Michael Dryden, and now Dryden Vreeland Prize. That was inspired by my high school English teacher. And that was a prize for people who were teaching high school English. And then we made that so it was anyone who was working in the K through 12 omniverse, basically. Our late friend, John Ridlin, was a poet that we felt had kind of found his stride in his older age. And so we have the John Ridlin Prize for older poets. That, I think, has probably been our most popular prize in terms of the number of submissions.
Go older poets.
Go older poets, yeah.
Sorry, younger poets.
And then, of course, Alta California, we had a chance to work with our friend and fellow poet laureate, Emma Trellis, and she has done great work.
Yeah, and that also came out of the Poet Laureate program in Santa Barbara. So having that kind of civic support to recognize people and kind of give them the encouragement to think in bigger terms of what they could do for poetry. It encouraged Emma to apply for some big grants. She got some funding and was able to bring that project to us. And we've kept it going, even though she's no longer our poet laureate. She's, we're still keeping this program going because it's so meaningful.
As a smaller press, it's pretty much right here. And your writers, of course. What is it that you feel you can do as a smaller press for your poets, and then what do you hope your poets do back for the press? How does that relationship work? Because it seems like it's much more of a relationship maybe than if you somehow get a book with some larger press, as if there are many of them left publishing poetry, but let's pretend we're in that world.
Yeah, I always, once in a while I'll be talking to somebody, I'll say, I'll connect you to our shipping department. Because you do everything. I mean, but that's part of the joy of it, is you get to make something. There's pros and cons of collaboration, and a lot of collaboration involves a lot of compromise. We're able to do what we want with poets who know what they want, and it almost, I think, that's very satisfying that it's a small group and it's an influential group, and you really get to work with the poet to bring their poems forward to an audience. Yeah.
And then in answer to part 2 of your question, we assume that the poet will be doing a good bit of the work in terms of promoting the book, and that's just the case across the board. I think even if you're publishing with Norton or something like that, is that we will do everything we can to assist you to get your book out there. If there's a prize that you think is just the right one for you, we'll go to bat for you in that regard. But it is definitely a give and take. I also want to say we should thank our spouses, George and my wife Sandy, out there for being the additional shipping department. The actual shipping department.
Or the put up with the grief department. This is what happened today.
It's the human resources.
So what made you start Anacapa Review then, since that's about 3-4 years now, is it? Just 2?
We're still in our 2nd year.
Oh, wow. Okay. It seems like 3 or 4.
So we were lucky to win a Pushcart Prize our very first year with Anacapa Review, which is our online poetry journal. I give a lot of credit for that to Chryss. She saw something, well, initially you saw it as a monthly journal, which I told you was going to be too much work. It really turned out to be a little bit too much work. But now it's every 2 months, and we publish 10 to 15 poems at the most. It's designed as Chryss was thinking, that you would just sit down, open up your phone, your computer, whatever, and you'd read through the entire piece. And so that I think is part of our aesthetic too, because there's not a lot of 10-page poems in there. In fact, there's none, because that's not the way that you would read through a literary journal. So I think that was an important part of that.
And I think a lot of our hope has been providing opportunities to poets at all different levels. So not only, award-winning books, but then we've done the Shoreline Voices anthologies that are open to individual poets for just a couple of poems. And also Anacapa is part of that, of, just bringing people in, helping them get those first publications that we're working toward a book as they're building their first manuscript, or as they're building their second or third, and having them side by side with poets that are more established. I think we just saw a need for that, and it's been fun.
I can see your phone there. I'm thinking it's probably about time for us to get off stage. Do you have any final questions for us?
Well, the one last question I was going to ask was about Gunpowder achieving its nonprofit status last year. Congratulations, because that's a big step. And what do you hope happens now that you've got that nonprofit status?
Apparently the grants just come raining in, and we can do more work. No, it gives us the opportunity to do more outreach. There are things that, for so long, David was really the one running this. I mean, it was not a separate entity. It was David.
And my wife can attest.
David and Sandy doing all the paperwork and the taxes and the mailing out checks, and it's just a lot to do as an individual. And so now we have a more official structure, and then I think it sets us up for where the next years might take us. I think we're going to need a lot of art and a lot of poetry, and it's going to come from different places. So we're ready. We're ready for it. All your donations now are tax deductible, by the way, rich people in the audience.
After you donate to Beyond Baroque.
After you donate to Beyond Baroque. But you can do a lot of collaborations with other nonprofits once you have that status. So it's exciting. It's like a new door, and we're still learning what it means.
Well, shall we open it up to our poets now?
I would say that's a
All
good
right,
thing.
so we're going to
Scene
get
change.
Thank
change.
you, Chryss and David. Long may you boom.
Thank you, George.
Which ones?
Hi, I'm Nan, and I am so happy to be here with Chryss and David and George and Sandy and all of you, and to be reading with Crystal and Amelia and Nick and Catherine and Susan and Chryss. I am going to, did I turn my stopwatch on? I didn't. I'm going to be mindful of my time, but I do want to just say that small presses have to be staffed by very sincere people. And I don't want to sound too much like Linus in the Pumpkin Patch, but this press is perhaps, I described them as we were talking beforehand about it being the kindest small press in America. I think it may also be the most sincere. I mean, who takes the proceeds of a textbook that they wrote themselves and plows it into starting a press to publish their friends, including a very fine poet, David Case, who would never be able to repay them for what they did. Those are beautiful books. I mean, I think you should buy everybody's books, but The Tarnation of Faust and before going to Alabama, is that right? I always forget the preposition. Are beautiful books and well worth your attention. I think it's just such a witness to the to the labor and the care and the commitment that it takes to help bring people's poetry into the world, and you could hear in pretty much everything that Chryss and David said that the press is about uplifting voices that they feel need to be heard. I love what Chryss said about the poem that stays with you. You're still thinking, you still have that image in your head a few days later. I love that. So the book that I was so fortunate to publish with Gunpowder Press is called Unfinished City. The poems are in dialogue with the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. I'm going to read 2 poems about Eve from this book, and then a few others and a new one. The first one is called Eve's Childhood. Of course I had one, just like you. Like you, I know that someone said my name to me many times, every day, until it hooked onto something inside and was my name. Like you, I didn't know I was a child, and then I knew I was one. Like you, turned my face to the light, then turned away, and what I came to know as colors and shapes resolved themselves into things. Those things acquired names. My hands went out and felt them. Then curved around an apple, round and blazing like the sun, red dappled with yellow, every cell packed with fragrance, every cell packed with sweetness. Too late to stop the hurtling toward the world. I had to keep going, to taste the names, to bite, to speak my one sweet sentence. You felt it too. Even the garden. This poem, we've been talking about how, we all came from our various places in California, and my husband and I live in the middle of the valley, and I always associate this poem with the house that we were able to buy in 2003, and the roses that we inherited from the previous owners. Even the garden. When we came in August, there were roses, budding, half opened, in bloom, and some we had missed in their glory, their histories lost to us. The future is ours, and so I took up orange-handled shears, and all morning I severed and severed. Whatever knotted shape the canes took, I cut away, with the small red buds that would have been new growth. Now, above each bush, a sphere of air. May I be spared to cut again, sever one future, shape another. I was fortunate recently to publish 3 new poems in Bennington Review, along with 2 beautiful poems by my colleague Julian de la Cruz, who is here. And I pulled this envelope out of the place where I'd marked, so I have to find them again. But these are, I think, like Chryss, I began as a somewhat formal poet and have always been very attracted to the very lyrical. And these are a little bit of a departure for me because they're more fragmentary. It's a series called From the Lost Notebook, and the conceit is that the fragments in this lost notebook kind of assemble to make something lyrical together. From the Lost Notebook 20. What kind of apple did Eve eat? What time of year do birds start to sing? Earlier dawns, slightly longer days, possibly more complex songs. The need to practice, even in winter. 73 questions a day. 3 to 5-year-olds quickly learn who gives good answers. Ancient Egypt. After death, they opened the mouth for the soul to breathe, could also eat and talk. Take your questions with you to the afterlife. From the Lost Notebook 10. Sunrise side, east, but also north and south, i.e., moving slightly northeast each day, and therefore striking each leaf differently. Wind, hard to account for. Tree leaning over its reflection, leaf lands lightly, mirror flutters. Molt, mutate, alternate plumage. My face, the sun on it. Things I've never written about and have misplaced the words for. And the last poem is called Infinity Scarf. If you don't know what an infinity scarf is, it's a scarf that doesn't have 2 ends. It's knitted or crocheted in one loop, and you put it around your neck, and then you can twist it and put the other loop over your head. These are really challenging times. I know most people have lived through at least one set of challenging times. It's my hope that sometimes a poem's not the only thing that can help you with a challenging time. But it's my hope that a poem like this might offer like a little bit of warmth and a little bit of embrace for all of us who need it. Yeah. Infinity Scarf. Like our mothers and our grandmothers, we grow older in what we increasingly recognize as history. It's a lot, no question. Today, I pull it over my head, the wide loop that Mary's mother knitted, and, when I admired, gave to me. It's what the yarn people call variegated. Is that not a wonderful word? Like the one houseplant we're managing to keep alive, with its broad green, pink-striped leaves, or the Arctic snailfish that produces its own antifreeze proteins and darts about bravely, glowing under the ice. It's all the colors of warm, this scarf, gold and cinnamon, toast and hay. Thank you very much.
Oh boy, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see. Hi, everybody. I can't see you out there because of the lights, but I just want to say quickly what it's been. I don't have the words for how wonderful it's been to work with David and Chryss and Gunpowder Press, and of course I've dubbed them my publishing saints because they are saints, and I'm so grateful for all that they've done for me and for so many. I'm going to read 5 poems, 2 from my first book, Gatherer's Alphabet, and 3 from my more recent one, or my recent one. The first one I wrote a long time ago, and it's about fires that happened a long time ago, and I'll mention Chernobyl in it, so that tells you how long ago it was. Fireweed, Epilobium augustifolium. The species comes rapidly into burned and destroyed areas. California mountain wildflowers. Fireweed. Like avalanche lilies, they heal Earth's blistered skin. A careless match, lightning and high blue spruce ignites spiky racemes along fire-swept slopes. Airborne, the fuzzy pods undress, descend, shower downy, tufted puffs. For once, good news travels swiftly. Excuse me. We travel in wide circles, skirting the pinkish brush where infant stalks push up. We venture inward, but step lightly, not wanting to crush the lovely. It will take years for the pines to turn green, for amber rings to form precisely inner eyes. Now the masked raccoon sleeps the burned-out hollows. Sunlight seeps through its gutted crib. Glowing Chernobyl pollinates the sky, sinks slowly into molten fields. If all goes well, this forest will reclaim its piney steeples, scenting the dark bark of the mountain chickadee's hutch. The scarred black trunks rise around us, crumbled stumps, ashen roots let go their tenuous grips. Limbs rip, branches crack. But the birds have returned, dusky grouse and nuthatch, along with the small creeping things that were not burned. Close pink buds droop open, split into mouths or bells or tiny alarms. Splayed pink tongues spit sticky, cream-colored stars. Whole galaxies loft and float, sway and dangle, jittery, crab-like stigmas. Spools of ice unwind into clouds above us, our pale city limbs out of place, touching spider-white stamens where sweet yellow pollen silts the wingtips of bees. We are stung by the simple wisdom of visible things. Fireweed burns away some stubborn membrane behind our eyes. We turn back to the car. We kiss. We turn again, our resilient bodies to the wind. And the next one is the title poem, Gatherer's Alphabet, and it's an abecedarian. Gatherer's Alphabet. Archive day, night, spring, summer, autumn, winter. Be an apothecary of wonder. Arrange an arsenal of antidotes called art. Admire avocets and arachnids. Bottle up buddies, beauty, and even brambles. Bravos to Buddha, to butterflies, and to brash buddleia bouquets. Collect coriander, carpenter bees, carnivals, and carp. Consort with the condemned. Dive into the country of being. Dive in unafraid. Elope with crow on the coldest morning of your life. Fish with the ghosts of salmon. Drag the river for their sisters' bones. Get greedy. Get down on your knees. Greet the grass with a kiss. Haul hope in, big truckloads of it, build big hills of it in your backyard, hoard it along with any hugs. Invent a tool for digging up one fat root to anchor you. June is the time to gather jars of jasmine and jewelweed. Keep your kitchen stocked with keepsakes, kestrels, curiers, kisses, and kites. Lift the shine from snail trails, trout scales, add lusty to your lexicon. Listen, lap gold from Limoges. Make a gatherer's list, make a map, then abandon it. You are only a mist. Notebooks are good for the illusion of containing. N is for nihilist equals nil. Oleanders, orchestras, orchids, and Omar Khayyam under the O's. Pack your parlor with plethora, parakeets, poetry, and plum jam. Quietly become the queen of quantum. Round up the red diamonds of sunset, the repertory of river reeds. Sorrow has its own saloons, filled with soldiers and suicides. Tease the shadows out of hiding. Tally the dead, but also the truth of the living. Utter the name of each thing at least once. Understand the word as umbilicus. Verbs, vines, veins, verisimilitude, and venom should appear in your variorum. Whole-souled, wholeheartedly grab the world. Whoop it up, weep. X out the Xeroxed ink blot you think stains your soul. Yoke yourself to yellow, to the life-giving yarrow. Yearn, yawp, yowl. Zoom the zones of the ineffable. Life zips by. Leave your mark like Zorro.
About 3 minutes.
Okay, so maybe I'll just read two of these. Teaching poetry in the prisons. I think of him as a victim, a veteran of war. Every day was the enemy in a household that thought children should be punished with barbed wire, belts, burns, punches, pinches, slaps, kicks, starvation, where meth was the vitamin, sex was the money, where poverty was the neighborhood, poverty was the country, and nobody ever called him honey until high school freed him to be part of something larger than himself, a gang. They robbed a convenience store. Someone got shot, killed. He did not pull the trigger yet. Here he is 20 years later, life without parole, shaking my hand, smiling at me, thanking me for helping him learn one new word. I live in Sacramento, where the river, American and Sacramento rivers converge. Confluence. A mile from here, two rivers meet, two strangers talking river talk, befriending each other, joining hands for the long trip home. Those of us who live beside them watch their water levels rise and fall. In our dreams, we hear them breathing, and the currents become exhalations. Tonight, we'll stand along the pebbled shore like herons and egrets, necks craned skyward as the wolf moon disappears into total eclipse, blood moon. Rain will fall, storms will blow in, but we will stand there planted among the cattails and willows. We will think we are still dreaming when the ghosts of the mothers and fathers arrive, when they hold hands with us, singing. Thank you. Thank you, Publishing Saints.
I'm Catherine. I want to echo what Nan and Susan have said about Gunpowder Press and about David and Chryss. And I'm just thinking back to what Chryss said about how we are going to need art and we are going to need poetry. And she was talking about our culture, our nation, our world. And, you know, I mean, David and Chryss are both wonderful, wonderful poets. And, I mean, thank God they're also generous, gifted, visionary people who have been able to put together a press. And so I just want to register thanks for that, because it does get more and more important. So I was fortunate to be, as David said, the first winner of the SPAX Prize. Really grateful, and my first book came out of that. Gunpowder has published 2 more of mine, and so what I'm going to do is read one from each of these collections, and I'm going to start with the new one. And so Empty Me Full was published in October 2024, and I'll read the poem from which the title comes. It's called Falling Song, and it has an epigraph from A.R. Ammons from his poem Corson's Inlet. Here's the epigraph. I allow myself eddies of meaning in the overall wandering of mirroring mind, but overall is beyond me. Per the latest thinking, they're both right, the gradualists and the catastrophists, about how the Grand Canyon formed and continues to form. All I know is that there in the canyon, I fell into my own interior. Now I'm paying closer attention than usual, taking it all personally, the mechanics of debris flow, for instance, the histories of Zoroaster granite, Vishnu schist, bright angel shale. Names I roll in my mouth like lozenges from another world. And how did the canyon wren find its way here? Into my rib cage, I mean. Listen, there it is. Slot Canyon clear, that falling song. Fill me empty, it goes. Then it goes, empty me full. Raft of Days was published in 2017, and some of it, well, I think it kind of imagined itself as a book. based on poems I'd already written. And then I had a residency in 2016 at the Whiteley Center on San Juan Island at Friday Harbor Labs of the University of Washington. And so a number of the poems came from that, as did the book as it sorted itself into order. So the first poem in this book is called Cinnamon Teal, and it is from that residency. Later, of course, I read that what I thought were cinnamon teal, intrepid pair on a cold sea, so cinnamon, so teal, were probably not, as they haven't been identified here for over a decade, climate changing as it has been. But at the time, I was unaccountably happy, thinking that's what they were, repeating the two words like a chant to the driftwood as the tide rolled its clicking stones to shore and sucked them out again. And though I got it wrong, that hasn't kept me from savoring the name, its velvety mouthfeel, just one of the things to love about poetry, though I'll be the first to say I love the world even more. By which I mean the actual ducks and pebbles and driftwood, cormorants and ancient murrelets, all parables of reproach, the dug firs splitting rocks, the wintering loons and buffleheads. Especially, I love this, the delicate crab shell that survived the rough and tumble of tides on Harrow Strait in late November and has come to rest here for now on the dark sand and dark stones on a dark morning, bright as a poppy. And I'll read the title poem from Instead of Sadness, my SPAC's book. Instead of Sadness. I'm lying in the bathtub thinking about death. Land that welcomes every immigrant, no question asked. No quotas, no wall along the border. More and more of those I love, not to mention acquaintances and people I've only read about or seen on the news, have packed nothing and moved there. But I don't know. I have what's probably an irrational devotion to the mess I'm in right here, a lot of which I've made with my own hands. And I miss my books, a couple of movies from the 90s, shoe stores. All I'm saying is I think it warrants further thought. Something tells me, though, I'll meet you there sooner or later. You know my famous hunches. Remember Escondido, the green Volkswagen? I hear the wine is good. That's something. Word gets back. We'll find ourselves a rock in the sun, take turns reciting Dickinson and Keats, maybe some Spender. You can do a little Dylan if the mood strikes. For now, though, it's a jumbled life, shabby, incandescent. From the bathtub, through the window, I can watch the stars come out. Thank you.
Hello, it is bright. Well, I want to thank you for having me, and I want to thank Gunpowder Press for publishing my first book. It's called The First Amelia, and It's named after and dedicated to my grandmother. She and I share a name. She spent all her life in the small Mexican coastal state of Colima, and so I grew up visiting her there, but we didn't speak the same language. She spoke only Spanish. I spoke only English at the time, and I sort of found that as I was writing the poems that would eventually become this book at UC Santa Barbara as a student, I kept coming back to her. You know, she passed when I was a teenager, and I think I needed to tell myself the story of her life because I never got to hear it from her. So in addition to the sort of queer coming-of-age story that's woven through, this book is really her story. So this is Comala, Colima, 1968. House made of grass, courtyard with rooms around it, gopher dead in the orchard, and she, so swollen with child, guava trees with ripened bounties, no envy. Here in Colima, where light is green, where neighbors' hands strip car tires and cowhides, making shoes that carry her and women like her to market, to barter for cornmeal and news. She does not think of the inevitable leaving. There is only coming and going, stirring of babies within and without, pots to be scrubbed in the basin with its covey of small black snails. But if she were to ponder it, I'm sure that she would reason that she sings at baptisms, so God is familiar with her voice. This is Comala, Colima, 2009. My father, knifeless, breaking guava scent into mid-afternoon. If the neighbor noticed bearing branches, she says nothing. So we sweeten cobblestone paths slicing the courtyard in the lean mileage that framed his pre-American life. I tread all 20 years in 2 hours, past the lime-washed chapel, fountain where my parents posed before those days swallowed water. In the smallest shop, hot with the tang of cut rubber, a wooden turtle bobs its ceaseless head. I cross the brick square with it clutched in my palm, walking on into the wound of that green light. As I was writing, I relied not only on my own memories, but also my father's stories of growing up in Colima as the oldest of 6 surviving children. This poem is built from those stories, and it does contain pregnancy loss. So if that's a sensitive subject for you, please feel welcome to step out for the next minute or so. This is eldest. Always this, the headless gopher. My father, his stories of blood. One twin forgets her half who was buried, but my father remembers. He was there, washing sheets in the dish basin, boiling rain for the first Amelia. In some families, a red-strung forehead meant airflow forever. In mine, crimson was neighbor boy running with knives, eye patch after, and strange science, dissection day where theme of the class was bring your own. There's a story within this story, lost to stillbirth. My father never talks about the babies, only what he killed to keep the garden safe. The winners of the Alta California Chapbook Prize, the books are published or translated into Spanish, and so it's very poignant to me that despite our language barrier, this is a book that my grandmother would have been able to read. So this is a poem in which my grandmother and I speak the same language. I made you a ghost and said, haunt these pages. At the heart of my book, you're rattling doors. I'll pick up lamps you knocked from tables, tuck your still dark hair into place, say, look, I gave you tomatillos and ajo, built a world where you spent your last year in Colima counting green iguanas. I touched your hand and saw your early days before corner stores with red foiled chip bags, when trees were still lush with white-lipped frogs. You and I could live forever, me learning to flip tortillas without burning my fingertips. Or if not alive, at least hungry, spirits who turn the stove on, 2 Amelias hovering above the turning earth. because of our shared name and sort of its service as a point of connection, it became a motif throughout the book. And so the guzzle was a very fruitful form for me. The guzzle is a poetic form with a lot of rules. I don't follow all of them, but its most distinctive feature is that it's made entirely of couplets, and each couplet ends in the same word. And often the poet will sign their name in the last couplet in some way, their actual name or the meaning of their name. So there are two guzzles in the first Amelia. The first is called, "At 14, I skipped church for the first time." 100 degrees, and here I am watching sparrows, their industrious winnowing around the parched gray lot. Inside, singing has started, voices winnowing out into motionless air. Our God, like chaff, blows the wicked away. God's talent, winnowing. Last week, we made the school building Jericho, walked its border 3 times, certain we'd win, knowing, prayer is like a key, it opens. There's a girl in class who talks of parties, bodies, window into the lives of them, the chaff. Once I imagined going, me in a dress I'd seen in a catalog, winnowing through terrible crowds to find her, maybe her saying pleased, "Amelia." She would know me. This is baby book guzzle. Photo. I'm laced to the chest of my mother, half lost in lens flare and grain. 6 months old, I've lost nothing, not growth plates nor earrings, not last day of summer to flu, not gone from chosen to lost in a moment, become flightless bird with list of small rebellions. And my mother, she's lost no me she believes in, leaves certain truths lost in green blur of milk glass, cracks that get glossed over, like any minor tragedy. Snared kite, teeth left unflossed, dead warbler, a deplaned Amelia, first transatlantic, then lost. The last poem I'll read is called On Friendship. 1. Your face like heat and language of discovery. How you say, sometimes. How vacuum whir of my straw almost wipes the words from air. I have a poor memory. Often I am surprised by old news. 2. At parties, for short films, for your boyfriend. In my bedroom, Christmas lights inventing shadows across your arms. 3. We even wear the same shoe size. Our wardrobes fold into one another, 2 hawks sparring in flight. My eyelids flicker as you brush crushed ruby across them, your brow a projected image slotting into place. 4. Both of us shivering in past curfew air, and I despise you. I never want to speak to you again. I am dressed in your skirt, and it is nothing for you to hew down to the core of me. Yes, I want to see you tomorrow. Yes, the small blue pocket where I keep my rage is shaped like you. 5. Always the pool too cold to swim in. Always you, threatening me with a good time. 6. I wondered, of course, wouldn't anyone? On dragon-pocked maps of our futures were compasses pointed at each other's names. On my waist, rumors exactly the size of your hand. 7. Surely there are worse ways to be told, once I loved you, than with my hair in the braid you taught me. Your face, like the first time we... Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hello, Lila, that's my wife. Thank you. And thank you. I'll start that timer. Thank you to David and Chryss and Gunpowder Press. As others have said, I felt such care and felt very loved in the bringing of this first chapbook of mine into the world, which is Levitations, a couple years ago. And I also like to joke, it's bilingual. We worked with the illustrious Emetreus to translate into Spanish, which I speak, but not as well as I perhaps wish I would, and maybe I don't often start poems in Spanish, so it's really a gift to also have them in both languages. And Gunpowder Press has sort of spoiled me, where I basically expect that future books will also be the same. All right. This book is largely about the death of my father when I was a child, and he was a firefighter paramedic, and it was a sudden death. He died while he was attempting to save somebody. And so the first poem I'll read, it was a very high-profile death. It was an experience where we were dealing with this private loss of our father, but it also was a big deal that these Los Angeles Fire Department firefighters died. And so many years later, there was litigation, and one day, when I was much older, I saw on YouTube this silent video of the crash. This is watching a computer animation of the Los Angeles Fire 3 helicopter crash for my father, 1964 to 1998. You are in the red and white chopper on the other side of the screen, the other side of the sky, and I cannot see your face. The mountains you fly over come into the foreground, non-threatening, royal. The machine glides like it's entering the sky for the first time, through a portal from another era. The main rotor spins, unspooling the air around it. It is a video game, the way the tail rotor snaps off, the way the chopper tilts left and wobbles. You and the others are now cedar waxwings drifting over the expansive green of Griffith Park. In the Army, you jumped out of planes. On my 9th birthday, you and I did a skydive simulator. How did Norma, the wounded girl airlifted, look? Is there no way to tell me how you are doing? The wounded chopper approaches land, the brown and green landscape blurrier, block-like. Then pine trees appear, like popsicles out of the ground. The pixelated helicopter clips the trees, crashes, lodged in the ground like a stake. There's no fire in the animation and no sound. The trees tower still and huddled around the chopper, as if they might bend down at any moment to you in the debris. My father's name was Eric, and his mother, my grandmother, is also here in the audience. And for the beginning of my life, at this big event, my dad died suddenly in a helicopter accident, and I was exploring in this poem from another angle, like it wasn't just my dad that died. I was thinking of her. How rain appears. Losing a son in the prime of his life is like losing a mind, not in a dark time, not a period of great duress, not gradually, just all at once. The way the sky goes from not rain to rain, to rain, to rain, to rain, to rain. The way the mind thinks everything's all right this morning, or that God is here, and then no, of course, God doesn't exist, never did, and those who think so have never been. Never mind, this is what it's like to lose a mind. I mean, what it's like to lose a son. And what are we without our minds, without our sons, my God? So as I said earlier, Gunpowder Press, and especially Emetreus, translated this, so I'd like to read that poem also in Espanol. It's called Cómo aparece la lluvia. Perder un hijo en la flor de su vida es como perder la cabeza, no en una época oscura, no en un periodo de gran coacción, no gradualmente, solo de una vez. La forma en que el cielo pasa de no llover a llover, a llover, a llover, a llover, a llover. La forma en que la mente piensa que todo está bien esta mañana o que Dios está aquí y luego saber, por supuesto, Dios no existe, nunca existió y esos quienes piensan así nunca han sido, no importa. Esto es lo que es como perder la cabeza. Quiero decir, es como perder un hijo. ¿Y qué somos sin nuestras mentes, sin nuestros hijos, Dios mío? I'm going to read one more from this book and then close with a new poem, a newer poem. This is called Burst. Some of my best memories with my dad were on a soccer field, and it's very beautiful now. My daughter, who's in the audience, I get to be her soccer coach. But one day when I was just in my apartment. It was here in Santa Monica, and I was just eating a tangerine, and that's where this poem comes from. Burst. To peel open a tangerine is to be startled by the scent of burst and burst and burst, and to access the memory of soccer fields, my dad cheering me on, the dewy cut grass, the worn shin guards, to feel my head against his chest. It is to taste the smell of the juices and to reach for what seems gone, but is really just ripening, primed to be opened in bursts. And I like what I heard at the beginning of, we're all living through a time where people feel fear. I would argue those with the least amount of power among us are being attacked, and that includes our immigrant community members. And so it feels almost like that this is happening again, that this has happened over so many administrations, but this administration's cruelty seems to be particularly unique. And several years ago, I read an investigation that ProPublica did about some of the family separation, and I listened to this audio recording of this little girl whose name was Jimena, and she memorized a phone number to call as she was being separated. And I wanted to write about her, and not just in a way that documented her fear and documented the cruelty of the people in power, but actually tried to look at this girl and imagine her resilience and her joy and her life. It's called Jimena in Flight. Believe this little girl will fly, play with her shopkins. Girl in the audio with the phone number is a winded fighter. Little girl, memorized phone number, will have a memory like a wind tunnel, like an amelioration. She'll be a number wizard, a genius. Believe in her brave, her boundless future, and do not focus on su sufrimiento. Esto no es just a language of pain, it is one of yes and beauty and great fire. Intelligence, this is not just trauma. This is, look, she will fly. She will bend the world in light. She loves, she is loved. She loves pizza. 6 years old. Vamos, niña, this is your world now. Both countries, and in between, all yours, this big, your world, all of it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Primo. My name's Crystal Salas. I call Nick Primo because he's my poetry primo. We didn't know each other previous to being co-winners that year of the first Alta California Prize. We met on the day of our book release, and both of our abuelas were there, and my abuela still asks about his abuela and his family. And one of the just most treasured poetry friendships of my life was started that day, and we went on tour, and that's something that this prize and this press gave to me. And I totally agree with Amelia. I was really lucky in that my abuelita, who doesn't speak English, was able to read these poems, which were all written in a time of navigating like a downpour of like torrential downpour of many different losses within our family. So it was really amazing to be able to see, for her to hear what I had been writing during that time and to understand it. I'll start with this poem called Elegía Poética. I was not born into the arms of my mother. I could breathe, but I couldn't digest. I breathed for less than an hour before a machine had to do it for me. I was born into the silence around my possible death. In the waiting room, my first cry belonged to my abuelita. When no one told her anything, this absence became words, then sentences. ¿Dónde? Mi nieta? Dios. Diosito. ¿Por qué? According to my mother, my abuelita became a puddle that no one could clean up. My abuelita's name is Clara. Mine is Crystal. Cristal. My parents said they named me after Billy Joel's saxophonist or a pretty rock. It's unsure. I lived, and the year my sister was born, our uncle died. Once that year, my abuelita says, she was helping my father bathe us, and I began to cry. She had to leave the room because I had become suddenly her dead son, fresh and small with his soul split by a scraped knee. I lived, and my abuelito, an atheist, saved my melted baptismal candles in a paper envelope. I lived, and every time I thought I would die, my child soul split by a scraped knee. My abuelito held me on the plastic-covered couch, even though his arms were stiffened from labor and a discomfort with being touched. My abuelito called us his reinas and introduced us to other royalty, Itzcotl, Pacal, Siqueiros, Galo, Rivera, Neruda, Fuentes, Marquez, Paz. My abuelito would introduce me as mi poeta, mi poeta, mi poeta. Some days the world won't call me that name to my face. Kind, nurturing, teacher, but rarely poet. The world wouldn't call my abuelito a scholar, immigrant, worker, unskilled, but rarely scholar. So he hoarded books in the barren field he was given. He talked sweetly to birds, had an orange finch named Pavarotti, who spent his days in front of a tiny mirror. He told me some birds get their food from puddles on the ground, but some birds can have the whole damn sky, from which everything comes, mija. I want you to eat from the sky, he said to me. Nunca mueres, he would say. When his breath became a machine, I became a puddle on the floor of the ICU. My father asked me to clean it up. My father never learned how to swim. He couldn't go to the city pool. Instead, he blinks 1,000 times for every word he can't say. Every time someone I love dies, I am reborn into a world I do not know and do not want to live in. In the hospital lobby, when I told my abuelita, I knelt at her feet and became the sea. I tread and tread until I felt the ridge of a different continent under her strengthening hands. She lived. I lived. Another shout out to Emma Reyes, who is the poetry queen. I know she was the poet laureate then. I introduced her to my abuelita as La Reina de Poesía because I didn't really know the translation for poet laureate. And that's just facts now. She's just La Reina de Poesía forever. It does not expire. I have my opening poem, The First Night of No One. I'll read it in Spanish first, and then I'll share it with you in English. La primera noche de nadie. Fui a Joshua Tree. El anochecer nunca tan claro en sus puntas. Pensé que podía inclinar mi cabeza hacia atrás lo suficiente para ver mi fingimiento, acunando en el cinturón del Orión, aguado en la Osa Mayor, suficiente para beber, exhale, inhale, mi propia nebulosa. No sé dónde está Dios, pero yo creí en ti, no como un Dios, solo un camino de polvo aún rastreable. Pero las estrellas robaron el mapa directamente de mi boca. The first night of no one. I went to Joshua Tree, the nightfall never so clear on its points. I thought I could drop my head back enough to see my pretending, cradled in Orion's belt, cupped in Big Dipper. Enough for me to drink, exhaled, inhaled, my own nebula. I don't know where God is, but I believed in you. Not like a God, just a dust road still traceable, but the stars stole the map right out of my mouth. And I just have one more for you. This is a poem called Sequoias, and I wanted to share it because I don't know, it's got me thinking about a lot of it's connected to a lot of things I've been thinking about lately. I hope that makes sense. A friend of mine took me to the Sequoias, sort of at the end period of these years of torrential loss, and of course going to, and they had recently, over the last few years, been going through their own torrential downpour of lost fires, floods, landslides, you name it. And of course, you take a poet to a situation like this, she'll make it about herself, and she did. So this is called Sequoias. The way up, orange cones alert to the damage. Every curve of road curdling in the water, dropping off in chunks. This is a mountain in distress. Sibling fires begat the wounded groves of fir and pine. Tooth-picked ghosts and their orphan roots begat the erosion, begat the earth that could not hold anything else when the rain came as it did, washed out hillsides, pulled down boulders into man-made plans. The scar across my neck changes shape, color, texture. First a fault pulled taut and cracking, then a row of swollen ants, then kintsugied, not in gold, but in an estuary of my own collagen. A giant sequoia can burn up from the middle, can burn up from the inside, then spend the rest of its life growing around the death, sewing up its own wound. I wonder what my neurotransmitters are up to. There were 3 years, it was a longer time than that. There were 3 years where all I wanted to do was sleep. The grass on Seraphine's grave died, resurrected, clovered, balded. With no order, Mike's ashes stayed on the unused dining table, in limbo, in stopwatch, and Clarita's fine motor skills got flooded by her own blood, and yet now she draws birds and grumpy cartoon men. Water springs from cliff sides, from places that are not supposed to be sources, seeping from saturation, nowhere else to go. Hope begat disaster, begat an avalanche pack resting in the path of its destruction, a carpet of forest already scattered over it. This too may not pass, but it will melt. And in 10 years, someone else will walk this trail and believe it has always looked like this. I think I have been wrong. Maybe sorrow is still movement, as it is gravity felt. We do not have to be linear about this, or even perceptible. My brain, a terrarium. No, a forest floor. Thank you.
This was a terrible idea. I am in the very difficult position of following these amazing readers. Oh, guys, he's so good. Thank you, David. This has meant so much to me, and I'm a crier. Sorry, I won't cry for my own poems, but I'm grateful for all of you being here. And I'm so grateful that we'll have each other in this time's coming, which are going to be rough. So thank you all. I appreciate that. I'm just going to read a few poems because we're running a little late. This is one called All the New Enchantments, and it was inspired by a Rousseau painting at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. One of our projects is things we call Shoreline Voices, where we collect poems by a bunch of people in response to things in our community. So this was for the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. All the New Enchantments. Things get better, things get worse. Rescue happens just in time. New robes cloak the ancient curse. The older the evil, the richer the rhyme. Be careful the forces you summon in song. Everything listens here, more than it seems. Many paths homeward, but so many wrong. Clouds of crows gather, then murders disperse. Many paths homeward, and so many wrong. Everything watches here more than it seems. An apple or rose where it doesn't belong. The older the evil, the richer the broth. Be careful the forces you summon in song. Old words wrapped in newfound cloth. Things get darker, things get lost. We have some really other poetry heroes here with Phil and Marcia, who are central to the Ventura poetry community and California's poetry landscape. So this is called Snake in Autumn. This is one that they published in Askew. Snake, you hid your slither still as a stick until we hit the crisscross of broken sun and oak dark tarmac. We left you writhing like a bullwhip, snap after snap on the black as the road broke to the left. And then I kept thinking, go back. It's also for my husband, George, who ran over the snake. So, and I am grateful for his inspiration in so many ways. Oh, you guys, my poems are also depressing right now. Let's see. This is the last poem I will read. It's called Poem Refusing to be an Oracle. There are 4 crows perched on our fence. They seem to squawk for my attention, but I am a poet. I channel tetrameter. I do not turn. They'll just be crows, 3 facing right while the other looks left. Black, 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 black. The poem wriggles on the page a silver minnow on a hook to lure the big fish from the deep. Nothing seems to rise to bite. The future's plans a secret still, opaque to the poet, opaque to the bird. Thank you all.
I want to thank you all again for being here. It's a great evening. One more round of applause for everybody. And I want to give one more round of applause to Chryss Yost, who is the heart and soul of Gunpowder Press. So I think our books are out there. There's an art exhibition, as we heard, that starts at 4. So if you want to buy books and have them signed quickly, let's all head out there to the lobby.